Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. As described in previous videos, over a dozen new prisons were built in the 1980s through 90s. Then there was about a 10-year pause until Kern Valley State Prison opened in June 2005 with a design capacity of almost 2,500 inmates. It is mostly a level 4 facility consisting of 4 semi-autonomous 180 design facilities and 2 standalone ad-seg units, all surrounded by a lethal electrified perimeter fence. There's also a level 1 minimum support facility on the grounds. This facility sits adjacent to North Kern State Prison, which is mostly used as a reception center where offenders are processed and classified before being sent to other institutions. But North Kern also has quite a few level 1 and level 2 GP mainline offenders. Prisons are located near Delano in Kern County, which is located north of Los Angeles County. Kern County has long been known as an agricultural area, and I know it fairly well, as my great tío Luis, rest in peace, and my primos lived in nearby Shafter for many years. I also know a former warden at Kern Valley fairly well as her cousin, who worked at the Kern County Jail, and we did a gang training together in the area about 10 years ago that drew almost 200 attendees. Kern County also has the relatively large city of Bakersfield, where one of the founders of the Mexican Mafia, Rodolfo Chancareno, was from, as well as original Nuestra Familia Mexicana founder Gonzalo Chalo Hernandez. I know it sounds very strange, but although they were in deadly opposing prison gangs, they were actually cousins, as explained in multiple previous videos. There have been many violent incidents at Kern Valley in recent years. A convicted child molester, Noah Rutherford, died from injuries he sustained in a November 2019 attack by his cellmate, Stephen Law. It is said that Law was very dangerous and could kill with his bare hands. Everybody knows that sex offenders are priority targets in prison. On January 12, 2023, CDC staff stated that Luis Bachica was killed by 3 inmates in a unit day room. All involved in this incident were said to be from Los Angeles County.
Crime Watch. An investigation is underway tonight at Kern Valley State Prison after an inmate died in an attack yesterday. Prison officials say 34-year-old Luis Bachica was attacked by 3 other inmates around 6:30 in a day room. He was taken to the prisoners' treatment area and an ambulance was called, but officials say he died within half an hour. Officers say they recovered 2 inmate-manufactured weapons. The suspects, Victor Madero, Ricardo Nava, and Edgar Castillo, were all transfers from Los Angeles County serving life sentences. We'll continue to follow this story as more information unfolds.
On October 6, 2023, CDC officials stated 2 inmates, Juan Camacho and John Martinez, allegedly attacked another inmate, Richard Sneaks Aguirre, with an inmate-manufactured weapon. Aguirre was from Pomona 12th Street and was involved in a 1997 quadruple homicide case with fellow Sharky Michael Spanky Guzman. During this attack, Aguirre was stabbed multiple times. Life-saving measures were taken, but he later died on his way to Kern Medical Center. As far as the 2 assailants, Juan Pipas Camacho is said to have been from Barrio Pobre in Long Beach and was sentenced to serve 47 years for attempted murder in the 2nd degree with the enhancement of discharge of a firearm. The other assailant, John Sleepy Martinez, was from the Avenues and was received in CDC in September 1998 to serve life with the possibility of parole for 1st-degree murder as a 3rd striker with enhancement of a firearm. He is a validated Mexican Mafia member and still shows being housed at Kern Valley. On October 14, 2023, 2 prisoners attacked another prisoner identified as Isaac Soldier Boy Duran with an inmate-manufactured weapon. Duran sustained multiple stab wounds and was transported to an outside medical center for care, but eventually passed from his wounds on November 9th at Kern Medical Center. The 2 attackers were identified as Roland Corona and Luis Weasel Avidres. Duran previously claimed a Norteño gang in Farmington known as Farmas. He was received from Tulare County in April 2003 and had been serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole for 2 counts of 1st-degree attempted murder with firearm and other enhancements, including street gang activity. While incarcerated, Duran was sentenced to serve an additional 12 years and 4 months for 2 counts of assault by a prisoner with a deadly weapon, 3 counts of possession of a deadly weapon by a prisoner, and battery on a non-prisoner. Supposedly, he was functioning okay as an soldado at Pelican Bay A Yard, but got deemed no good for reasons unknown to me. I believe then he joined the Northern Riders, but some say that he was forced to, and that it was not by choice. Roland Corona was received from Fresno County in 2003 and was serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole for first-degree armed robbery and burglary with firearms enhancements, and was a third striker. He was handed an additional 12-year sentence for 3 counts of possession manufacture of a deadly weapon by a prisoner. Alvidrez was received from San Diego County in June 2017 to serve an 18-year, 4-month sentence for 2 counts of second-degree robbery with personal use of a dangerous or deadly weapon enhancements, as well as 2 counts of second-degree robbery as a second striker. He too was sentenced to additional time while already in prison for possession of an inmate manufactured weapon. On February 10, 2024, a riot occurred between approximately 40 Blood and Crip gang members. Now, I know I haven't talked a lot about black gangs in this series, and some people ask, why don't I mention the BGF? Well, the short answer is there's not many of those guys left, but there are quite a few Bloods and Crips and Kumi 415 left. And I understand that this riot happened on the recreation yard, and officers initiated a Code 3 response in order to regain control. On that same day, earlier in the morning, an inmate attacked and battered a correctional officer, and that inmate was identified as being a Crip member. These incidents followed the murder of inmate Juan Trujillo, who was battered and stabbed a few days earlier by 8 inmates armed with shanks. Also in February 2024, federal investigators announced a major bust of Christopher Thomas, who was considered a shot caller for the Main Street Mafia Crips in South Central LA. He had been in prison since December 2010 for the murder of a rival gang member. In recent years, the Fed stated he ran a major drug trafficking operation and a $550 million attempted tax fraud scheme in an operation they dubbed Operation Fraud Street Mafia. Investigators said Thomas used contraband cell phones to coordinate shipments of methamphetamine to at least 4 states, as well as smuggle it into prison. On June 28, 2024, CDC announced the death of inmate Dwight Gibbs. 3 inmates named as Michael Brown, Jerry Dunham, Rick Dixie were named as suspects in the attack. Gibbs, who I believe was an African American, was received from LA County in January 2023 to serve 41 years for second-degree murder as a second striker. Brown was received from San Bernardino County in 1993 and had been returned on a parole violation to serve life without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. Dunham was received from Orange County in March of 1984 and was sentenced to 4 years, 8 months for robbery with the use of a firearm as well as assault. He paroled in 1986 and was discharged from parole in 1987. However, he was received back in April 1991 to serve 27 years and 8 months for attempted second-degree murder with enhancements. And in July 2000, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for assault by a prisoner with a deadly weapon. Dickey was received from LA County in December 1982 to serve 2 years for first-degree burglary. He paroled in 1985 and was discharged from parole in 1998. He was in and out of the system after that, and in 2018, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for an in-prison offense. In 2019, he was sentenced to another assault by a prisoner and was considered to be a third striker. He had previously been identified as being a past Nazi lowrider. I'm not sure what led up to this incident, but in my opinion, it is relatively rare these days for whites to attack blacks, and vice versa, due to the high probability that it will start a race war. Usually whites will take out their own and blacks will check their own. A relatively recent exception would be when the ABs took out Black Guerrilla family member Hugo Pinnell at New Folsom, who was a high priority target and which did in fact start a race riot afterwards. September 2024 was a particularly violent month. On September 15th, 2024, inmate Raul Latifa was found with an inmate manufactured weapon on his person. That same day, inmates Jesse Zambrano and Agustin Virto were observed attempting to murder inmate Joel Vasquez with shanks. On September 17, 2024, inmates Jose Hernandez and Jesus Zumaya were observed battering inmate Pedro Alvarez. On September 18, 2024, several inmates were observed fighting each other on the recreation yard, and staff were required to use force to stop the fight. After the fight, staff discovered an inmate manufactured weapon and a handcuff key. That same day, inmates Alan Gonzalez and Joshua Reyes were observed attempting to murder inmate Aryan Gallardo using inmate manufactured weapons. The next day, on September 19, 2024, there was another large fight at Kern Valley, and several use of force options were needed to stop this riot. Afterwards, 15 inmate manufactured weapons were discovered. That same day, several inmates were observed fighting inside of a housing unit that required staff to use force to stop the attack. And yet, in other incidents on that same day, inmate manufactured weapon was found in a cell occupied by 2 inmates, and a correctional officer was assaulted by inmate Angel Banuelos. September 19th was a busy day at Kern Valley. Inmate Jay Cobra was found murdered at approximately 7:20 p.m. when staff discovered Cobra in his cell with his cellmate, Matthew Trigger Perez. Cobra was unresponsive with his injuries. Life-saving measures were enacted on Cobra, but he succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced deceased approximately half an hour later. Perez also suffered injuries consistent with the inmate weapon, and word is that Cobra initiated the attack on Perez when Perez was able to gain control of the weapon, which he used in the fatal attack on Cobra. I heard that this occurred on a sensitive needs yard. And in yet another incident that evening, inmate Christian Bagsby assaulted a CDCR nurse, and several staff members were required to use force to stop that attack. Now, it's kind of strange because if you look at CDC press releases, sometimes they give very detailed accounts, and sometimes there are time lapses. For instance, one YouTuber commented that during a 3-week period, CDC stated that there were no incidents in any CDC institutions. And given that all these incidents happened just in the month of September 2024 at one institution, he found that very hard to believe. And almost a year ago, towards the latter part of 2024, I understand that an inmate at Kern Valley attacked 2 staff members when 2 other inmates jumped in, and eventually 6 staff were involved. Supposedly, this incident all started over a cell search. Supposedly, a weapon was used by one of the inmates, but this did not make the news because I believe, as I stated in my last video, CDC sweeps a lot of this stuff under the rug due to wanting to showcase their new California model of corrections and make believe that everything at San Quentin is Shangri-La and other institutions have greatly reduced violence. But they cannot deny when there's a homicide, and all these homicides in the news lately seems like there's one almost every week in CDC tell a different story. On March 7, 2025, inmate German Menace Marino, who I understand was from a tagging crew called Sureños do Kill, or SDK, was attacked by 2 inmates, Gilbert Garcia and Rodolfo Cortez, who were also identified as being Sureños, at B Facility A Block Day Room. The day room is usually the area in front of unit cells and in between the main unit door. In that incident, an improvised weapon was recovered at the scene. Supposedly, Javier Gangster Marquez from Leme put that hit out because the victim was doing business with blacks. Prison gang leaders will usually advise members of their race not to do drug deals with other races because it could cause a race war if things go bad. Also, if you can't pay a drug debt, violators are often taken out by their own, not by the other race, for not following these rules. In May 2025, inmates William Nessler III and Edward Holden III allegedly attacked fellow inmate Timothy Wellen. Prison staff responded immediately using verbal commands and chemical agents to stop the attack. But Whelan sustained fatal injuries and was pronounced dead later that afternoon. 2 prison-made weapons were found at the scene. June 6, 2025, Kern Valley reported yet another death. I believe this occurred on a sensitive needs yard, when incarcerated Mario Renteria allegedly began striking inmate Julian Midget Mendez from Northside Colton, which is located in San Bernardino County, multiple times. Mendez had been sentenced to death for killing a Westside Verdugo member and also killed a 14-year-old girl who was a witness to that. On July 4, 2025, staff observed inmate Fernando Camarillo Cervantes lying on the cell floor, appearing to have serious injuries, and his cellmate, Inmate Albert Gonzalez was standing in the cell. Officers immediately activated their personal alarms and initiated life-saving measures on the victim. He was taken to the prison's triage and treatment area where a local paramedic announced him deceased. Camarillo Cervantes was received from Santa Barbara County in September 2022, I believe from Santa Maria, and was sentenced to 21 years for voluntary manslaughter with an enhancement for the use of a firearm. He was also convicted of possession of a deadly weapon by an incarcerated person and sentenced in Riverside County on August 1st, 2023 to an additional 3 years. Gonzalez was more than twice his age and was recently returned from parole in September 2019 with a new term from LA County, sentenced to 11 years for carjacking as a second striker. He was also sentenced by San Bernardino County to 8 months for attempting to possess or own a firearm as a convicted felon. There seems to be some debate by viewers on whether or not you have to debrief as a validated prison gang member or associate to get out of the hole or get to a general population or sensitive needs yard. Now, keep in mind, CDC policies have changed greatly after the Todd Ashker lawsuit, and things were even different back in my day in the late 1980s through 90s. So I'm only speaking on my old experience and from talking to staff in more recent years. Before the end of hostilities agreement and subsequent lawsuits and court decisions, CDC could keep you locked down in the security housing units or SHU for years, even decades, unless you debriefed. Many called the SHU torture to get convicts to break down, and in many cases it worked. Guys rolled or died in custody, and in many cases they came out with mental health issues that some call SHU syndrome. Understand that in recent years, institutional gang investigators will let you go back to GP even if you have been hit, if you sign a waiver that you have no fears for your safety, but that you will usually be moved to a different yard unless there are circumstances such as they deem that only one individual was out to get you, and they had already been taken off that yard. If you get assaulted again, then staff is going to put you on a walk alone status until they decide what to do with you. But yes, usually is required that you debrief to get to a sensitive needs yard. If you do not debrief, they're going to make you sign a chrono that you're going back to general population at your own risk. In order to debrief from your active prison gang or associate status is an extensive process, and staff will assess your paperwork and make a decision if your debrief is genuine or that you're simply trying to get to another yard to hit a target, also known as being a sleeper. Remember, they are not just talking to you, but will seek the advice of other trusted staff and via the use of their extensive network of informants. In other words, somebody's going to tell, and there's about a 99% chance they're going to find out who you are and what you're about. At least at one time, there was a transitional housing unit, or THU, where you were housed until your evaluation and debrief came back. I hope this makes sense. Like I said, I'm a little rusty, but a good book on the role of a CDC gang officer is Yard Down by my friend Johnny Ray, who had almost 30 years experience before he retired from CDC. As I stated, many of the killings described in this episode were on sensitive needs yards. In particular, the 25 Pesetas and Zapatistas have been going at it hard for over 10 years now. 59J was housed at Kern Valley State Prison at one time, and I've heard some people don't like him. I don't know. I don't always agree with him, but it seems to me that he at least tries to do his homework. And I thought broke down Kern Valley pretty good recently. In particular, how D-Yard is broken into different units, mostly 25s and Zapatistas. We are both on the Nuestra Familia video put out by Vice. In my opinion, nobody knows everything, but everybody knows something. So check him out if you get a chance. In a recent federal RICO trial, prosecutors alleged that the Aryan Brotherhood facilitated many killings inside CDC, including the 2016 stabbing death of Brandon Lowry at the facility, allegedly over drug debts. Supposedly, AB shot caller Frank Clement and now released fellow AB Commissioner David Country Chance drew up a list of all white inmates with debts and started putting them on a hit list. It's my understanding that Lowry owed nearly $1,000 and was red flagged, meaning that no inmates could sell to him until he settled his debts. But Lowry flouted the order, buying more drugs instead of paying off what he already owed. Fellow AB Commissioner Kenneth Kenwood Johnson, who was housed at Kern Valley with Clement, allegedly co-signed on the hit. As described in a previous video, Francis Frank Clement authorized the killing of 2 P9 members who lost a couple duffel bags of dope that belonged to the ABs. I believe Clement was housed on B Yard at that time. He is said to have been on the phone when the two victims were killed at night in Pomona, California on March 8, 2022. Besides Public Enemy Number 1, or P9, and the Nazi Lowriders, or NLR, there are other gangs that support the AB in prison and out on the street. Robert Eversole, aka Rage, was housed at Kern Valley State Prison and was named in Operation Lucky Charms, which involved the Fresniks, based out of Fresno. At one time, Todd Ashker, the main organizer and author of the End to Hostilities Agreement and infamous prison lawyer, was housed at Kern Valley. Longtime AB member Danny Troxel assisted Ashker in writing up the class action lawsuit, and Ronnie Renegade Yandel also signed on. In yet another lawsuit that he filed over the years, Ashker stated that conditions at Kern Valley were even more torturous than at Pelican Bay, and he said that he was tricked into signing debriefing paperwork by IGI and has been held at California Men's Colony the last few years. There have been many Mexican Mafia members housed at Kern Valley over the years, such as Javier Gangster Marquez, mentioned earlier in this video, and Richard Cheeks Buchanan, mentioned in my last video. Also, Armando Spooky Sanchez from La Habra, currently housed at Kern Valley, and Victor Psycho Gallegos, currently housed at North Kern State Prison. I can't recall any NF being housed at Kern Valley at this time, but there were some Norteños there until CDC decided problematic to be housed there.
News at 5.
And thanks for choosing 23 ABC News at 5. I'm Jackie Parks.
And I'm Todd Carley. A major Hispanic prison gang has been shipped out of Kern Valley State Prison after prison officials say enough is enough. 23 ABC's Christine Din tells us how a riot years ago has led to the exile of that gang.
Today, Kern Valley State Prison shipped out the last of the Norteños, a northern Hispanic prison gang, making today the first day in 4 years the prison has been back to normal. It all started in 2009, when a large riot broke out between the Norteños and Sureños, a southern Hispanic prison gang, in which one Sureño inmate was killed.
For 4 years, the prison tried to reintegrate the two groups, but it proved unsuccessful.
The problem here is this was ground zero for the incident, the murder of the Southern Hispanic on this yard.
In March, another riot broke out between the Norteños and Sureños.
And multiple inmates were stabbed and received pretty severe injuries as a result of that riot.
Based on that, we've decided to ship the Northern Hispanics that we have here out.
Possibly in the nick of time. A couple weeks ago, officers conducted a sweep of inmate cells. Officials say typically they find 5 to 10 handmade weapons a week. But during that search, found nearly 30 weapons that week, all in the facility housing the Norteños and Sureños.
And one of the criterias for the Southern Hispanics dictated by the Mexican Mafia is that they have a weapon readily accessible at all times in case of something going on with one of the other disruptive groups.
So it looks like they were gearing up for something.
Possibly. And hopefully with this last decision to remove the Northern Hispanic population, it'll put a squash to this issue between the two groups, at least at Kern Valley State Prison.
Reporting from Kern Valley State Prison, Christine Din, 23 ABC.
As many of you know, a Kern Valley inmate recently escaped from custody. Cesar Hernandez escaped in December 2024 when he was scheduled for a court appearance. Hernandez jumped out of the van and took off, and all caught on video. Many question why the CO didn't fire a shot, as it looked as he could have safely done so, at least initially. Approximately 4 months later, in April 2025, Hernandez was caught and detained by Mexican police officers in Tijuana. Before his capture, it was reported that he killed a female Tijuana police commander during the shootout while authorities were trying to take him into custody. Not long after, Hernandez ran to a covered vehicle and changed into reflective road crew clothing to disguise himself. I saw a lot of good feedback on my last video concerning the new California model, which, as you can tell, I'm not too keen on. With all the violence leading up to these murders and riots, it is obvious to me that the impact of the California model is being forced down at prison administrators' throats by CDC headquarters, so they often underplay these events. The concepts behind the California model agenda, in my opinion, are replacing good and safe prison management, and many people, staff and inmates, are getting hurt. I really don't think you can compare Norway to California. To me, that's like comparing apples to oranges. First of all, yeah, I know, Norway has some criminal groups, namely outlaw motorcycle gangs, but California street and prison gangs are much more active on the streets and inside jails and in the California Department of Corrections. Like I've stated, gangs make up a high percentage of the inmate population in California compared to other states. But not all of them are killers. Only a small amount of inmates are responsible for the vast majority of the violence. One estimate suggests that less than 0.1% of the inmate population is behind nearly 20% of prison murders. I know I documented at the King County Jail that we only have between 5 to 10% security threat group members or gang members in custody at any given time, but they were responsible for 1/3 of the infractions in almost 50% of the fights, including assaults on staff. So yeah, I'd say they're a problem, even though I had a hard time convincing many staff at that facility to even pay attention to them. I only have a couple more videos left in this series, so please let me know if there are any questions left regarding individuals housed in CDC now or in the past, or about any specific institutions. Also, please be sure to leave your feedback in the comment section on this video. I'm always trying to improve this channel and give my viewers the best and most accurate content that I can. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.